Few things are more unsettling than a voice calling for help when none should exist. It taps into a deep, primal unease, the fear of an unseen presence, a mystery beyond understanding. For soldiers operating in remote regions, radios become their lifelines. But what happens when those lifelines betray reason? When the airwaves carry something that shouldn't be there? Static-choked whispers, desperate cries, and coordinates leading to nowhere. Imagine a barren expanse of wilderness, blanketed in snow and silence. The cold is omnipresent, seeping into bones and equipment alike. Trees stand like sentinels on the horizon, their skeletal branches reaching into an overcast sky. The wind whistles through rusted hulks of abandoned vehicles, hulking shadows of a forgotten era, their once mighty frames reduced to rotting shells. This is the graveyard, a resting place for Soviet military hardware that had long since succumbed to time. It's a place no one visits willingly, but now the radios won't stop, and they all point here. The tale of the unseen radio operator comes from the first-hand account of Staff Sergeant William Gaines, a communications officer stationed at a remote Arctic listening post. Gaines shared his experience reluctantly, his voice heavy with the weight of what he'd endured. "We'd been picking up chatter," he began, "the kind you don't usually get in a place like this. It started faint, almost like interference, just static with a rhythm you couldn't quite place. Then one night, I heard it. A voice, clear as day, asking for extraction. The transmissions always followed the same pattern. A man's voice, cracking with desperation, reciting coordinates in a heavily accented Russian. Gaines and his team verified the coordinates, and they always led to the graveyard, a stretch of tundra where decaying tanks, radar arrays, and helicopters stood like ghosts of the past. At first, we thought it might be some old signal bouncing back, Gaines explained, but the voice kept coming. Same tone, same coordinates, always begging for help. Recon teams were dispatched to investigate. They found nothing, just the carcasses of rusted vehicles and a scattering of animal tracks in the snow. No people, no signs of life. But when they returned, the transmissions persisted. "Help us. We're still here," the voice pleaded one night, crackling through the static. The desperation was palpable, tugging at the edges of reason. Even hardened skeptics began to feel uneasy. The equipment was checked and rechecked, but nothing was malfunctioning. Whatever was broadcasting on that frequency wasn't a glitch. One evening, the signal grew stronger. It was no longer faint. It seemed to fill the comms room, echoing like a voice just beyond the door. Gaines called the commanding officer to witness it himself. It was the same voice, Gaines recounted, same coordinates, but there was something different that time. Something colder. The last straw came on a stormy night when the transmission took an eerie turn. Gaines described sitting alone at the console, headphones on, the static hissing in his ears. "Help us," the voice pleaded again. But this time, it didn't stop at coordinates. "We see you," it said. "Why won't you come?" Gaines froze, the words chilling him more than the Arctic air ever could. He glanced at the monitors. Nothing. No movement outside, no heat signatures, no anomalies. Just snow and shadow. "I felt like I was being watched," Gaines said, "like someone was standing just outside the door, waiting." The transmission ended abruptly, replaced by dead air. Gaines tore off his headphones, but even in the silence, the words seemed to linger. The incident shook the entire unit. Even the most skeptical officers began to avoid the comms room after dark. The graveyard itself became taboo, a place whispered about but never visited. Scientists later theorized that the transmissions could have been remnants of old radio signals bouncing through the ionosphere, distorted by the frigid conditions. Others suggested psychological factors, isolation, stress, and the power of suggestion. But for those who experienced it, the explanation felt hollow. "Signals don't watch you," Gaines said. "They don't know you're there. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a signal." The transmissions stopped as suddenly as they began. One night, the airwaves were silent, and they stayed that way. Relief spread through the unit, but it was tinged with unease. Something had changed, though no one could say what. "It's worse now," Gaines admitted years later. When the voice was there, at least we knew something was trying to reach us. Now it's just quiet. He paused, staring into the distance as if he could still hear the faint hum of the radios. The silence feels heavier, like whatever was out there is still waiting, and maybe one day it'll start calling again. The graveyard remains as it was, a field of rusting relics, slowly being swallowed by time and snow. It's a place the soldiers avoid, a ghostly reminder of something they can't explain. Gaines, now retired, still dreams of the voice, a cracked, desperate plea echoing through the static. Help us, we're still here. Perhaps it's a trick of the mind, or perhaps the past doesn't rest as easily as we'd like to believe. Either way, the radios remain silent, but the memories persist. And for those who listened, the question lingers: who or what was calling for help from the graveyard of machines?